But the thing about, again, with the title is that, as I say, the word is charged the whole way through the novel, and then it has this other use, which is in Leroy, the brain-injured soldier, who has voluntarily retreated into himself and is telling himself stories, or maybe some of the stories that are being told to him are feeding into this dream, and then in the middle of that, the free appear.
What I was trying to say with Leroy was that he realizes his situation one night. He's in a group home for disabled men in a suburb, and he wakes up one night with clarity, and he realizes where he's at. And one of his escape, he knows he doesn't want to live like that anymore. So one of his ideas is to hide inside himself, and so he wants to live in a world where his girlfriend and him disappear up the Canadian coast, like a romantic kind of trip. But his mind won't let him just keep it being romantic, so it fluctuates from the very romantic escapism to the darker sides of his mind, horrific. And there's a group called the Free that decide who's a real American, who's meant to carry the flag, who's a real American. And I grew up in a home where there was no discussion. I grew up in a really hawkish family where you never disagreed. There was no democracy or conversation about things. It's either you agreed or you get beat up about it, not physically, And so it didn't help that I played music and was kind of a lefty, I guess, a little bit, or at least I always called myself middle of the road, and middle of the road in my house was, you might as well have been a commie hippie. So
You'll feel really at home here. I think you'll enjoy it.
So that was another thing of the Free. I was just trying to lay that to rest, because the kind of angry rhetoric that people throw around, I think is really dangerous. I think it's really dangerous to throw around, even in your personal life, to throw around dangerous words. I think you should be scared of saying things that are dangerous and violent, or just letting off steam verbally. I think can be dangerous.
It's a kind of a science fiction. It's a story within the story, and his mother, Darla, has always read him science fiction, or read science fiction with him. And so she's reading stories to him while he's in this this comatose state. And I was reminded as I was reading that of in Slaughterhouse-Five, in Billy Pilgrim after the war, he's in hospital, and there all the wounded soldiers are science fiction fans, and there's the fictional science fiction writer Kilgore Trout. And there's a line in it, the novel, something to the effect that they were having to reinvent themselves and their universe after the war, and science fiction was a big help. And early in the novel, as I was reading this and I was hearing Leroy was having these stories read to him, it reminded me very much of it. But in Vonnegut, that science fiction, it's a kind of compensatory fiction. There's no compensation in the science fiction, in the stories that are being told in the Free. It's very dark.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm tattooed with a dark streak in me. I always keep waiting for my, happy-go-lucky side to pop out when I'm writing, because I'm not such a sad sack person in real life. I've always tried to write that side of me out.
But when I say it's dark, I don't mean that it's dark. I mean it's true to the situation that the character. I mean, I can't imagine it being any other way. And it does. I wouldn't think of it as a book that is without humor, without all kinds of other things. But just specifically that thing with the stories that people tell themselves, which all your characters seem to do in the novels. They tell themselves stories or tell each other stories for comfort, for escape. But in this particular one, for him in particular, there's no way out.
Yeah, I mean, again, I was trying to say, Leroy wasn't even a soldier. He was a National Guard. In the U.S., the National Guard, it's written on paper that they can go to foreign wars, sure, but like all their ad campaigns, and believe it, they have a lot of ad campaigns, but all the ad campaigns are like that make you feel really good. They're like, if there's a forest fire, the National Guard will come. If there's an earthquake, they'll come. But they don't say, if you're 45 in the National Guard and things get strapped, we're going to send you to the Middle East. And I didn't know that. I mean, they don't advertise that. That's not in the fine print of the ad at the end, like the pharmaceutical ads in the U.S. that list 20 minutes of side effects. And so for me, Leroy wants to escape to this really romantic world, and he can't because his mind's shattered, so it'll get really dark for him, like it does with guys with brain injuries. It can get really dark and frustrating, and you can't control it. And I thought, man, here's this guy that, like Willie Nelson says, 99% of us don't find the right person, and that's why the jukebox will always be filled with sad songs, and that's why people will always be putting quarters and dollars into the jukebox to hear the sad songs. But this guy, Leroy, he met the right girl, but now he can't have her. And he can't even have her in his mind because his mind keeps tricking him and sending him into the darker side of himself. And everybody has a dark side, and everybody's dark side scares the hell out of them personally, what they perceive as hell. And he's not a dark guy by nature, but his mind won't let him escape it. And I thought, man, that's the cost. I'm not saying anything about war because I have no interest in writing about war, and I've never been in the Army, and it's not my right or to talk about that. But everybody knows what it's like to be around or take care of someone with long-term illness. And I was just saying, man, you took this really great kid, and now he has to live in this kind of world, and for what?